Welcome to another episode of the SparkCom podcast, where we discuss innovation trends and what's coming next in business. How are you doing today, Adam?
I'm doing great, Manny. How's life in Tucson?
Life is grand. Now, you just got back from a trip that took you to the other side of the world, huh?
Yeah, I did. It was quite enlightening.
I'm sure it was. One of the things I want to talk about today has to do with the entertainment industry in the end of the delta of the industry, right, where it ends. Typically, movies would be released, big budget movies at least would be produced and come up out of Hollywood and these other places, and the destination was the big box movie theater. And as a kid, I remember it was always a big event to go to the movie theater, and then having kids and pulling out my wallet and understanding it was going to be a $60, $80, $100 bill going to the movies, it sort of began to come out of favor in our family. It's still fun, but when we could sit back and push a few buttons and have Hulu or Netflix on, it made going to the movie theaters a little bit less luxurious. So what are your thoughts on that industry in general?
Well, I think it's fascinating. I live in Las Vegas, and of course, we're just a brief 3-hour drive from Los Angeles. And Los Angeles and Hollywood, that's the movie capital of the world. So we get a tremendous amount of entertainment news here in Las Vegas. And of course, a lot of the entertainers perform in Las Vegas as well. And what's always striking to me is just how out of step the industry is with what's going on in the world frequently. I think it's a couple of things. The time cycles of how long it takes to make something is still ridiculously long. They can take a year or even longer to fund and make a movie. Sometimes if you look from the script to the funding to the production to the manufacture to the distribution, you could have a 2-year cycle. 2 years. Nothing in the world takes 2 years anymore, right? It's just incredibly slow. That's out of step. The idea of how they put these things together, the different pieces, still almost like something out of the 1940s. Who's the producer, who's the director, who's going to be in it. It's not streamlined at all. It's a very archaic system about how they put the things together. And one that struck me the hardest was this notion that the Academy Awards, through the union, the music industry union, is in a position where it said that movies could not be reviewed for Academy Awards unless they were released in a theater. And I was just sort of dumbstruck by that statement a year ago, because it occurred to me how few people go to theaters, and why would you do that? And it gets back again to guys that run the industry today, like Steven Spielberg, and the people, they're old. These are people that are in their 60s and 70s and 80s. They're the leaders of the industry, and they still haven't caught up with what's going on technologically. They haven't caught on in a big way to how the consumer is absorbing their material. And so they still want to sit back and live as if it's the previous world. So that, as you said, big box office productions. How much money? You're spending $100, $200 million. And I'm just kind of fascinated. I look at all this and say, wait a minute, with today's technology, with the cost of cameras the way they are, with the way you can do so much on such a limited budget, that all of that just seems very arcane, very archaic to me. And I think they got hit with a real blow when COVID came along, because we had the shutdown. And when the shutdown happened, there was a sense of, well, okay, for 2 or 3 months, we'll kind of lay back and let's figure out if we're going to delay the Academy Awards for a year, what are we going to do? But last week, we had Cineworld, which owns Regal, come out and announce that it was going to close all of its theaters. That it was just like it had reopened, it wasn't working, they weren't making any money, and they were going to close their theaters indefinitely, certainly well into 2021. They didn't even know if they'd be open again by 2022. And this sort of rattled the cage. It made people sit there and wonder, well, what are we going to, what's the next step? And then AMC came out this week, here it is, second week of October, and they said, hey, we're going to run out of cash. They didn't say they're going to go bankrupt. They said by the end of the year, we will have run out of cash. So our theaters are open. We're probably going to have to close some more theaters. We're going to be out of cash. And if you run out of cash, you go bankrupt. That's what happens. And they're saying they're going to be in that position by the end of the year. Now, the theater people are saying the reason they're going out of business is because they don't have content. That's fascinating. You don't have content? I just got off a 14-hour plane. I went 14 hours in one direction, 14 hours on the way back. There were at least, on the airplane, at least 150 movies I could watch. on the plane, you know? And most of them I'd never heard of, but then again, I'm not a big part of the industry. I don't pay a lot of attention. There's not a lack of content.
No.
There's plenty of content out there. But the issue is the theaters are saying they're not looking for content. They're not doing any kind of what's called editorial. They're not trying to do any packaging. These guys are still operating as real estate developers, right? They're saying, buy a chunk of land, build a theater, put some seats in it, and then let's just sit back and wait for somebody else to give us content that we put up and make money on. And I'm like, wow, are they out of step?
Well, that has to do again with the topic we talk about a lot in the value and value delivery, right?
Yeah.
They're relying on this hardwired value delivery system that is breaking at the seams.
Yeah.
If you look at now, there are tons of movie festivals and movie grants and opportunities for movie makers to make movies with their iPhone.
Yeah.
Completely 100%, shot, edited, the whole deal with your phone. And so you're absolutely right. The whole idea and notion of the big box, $100 million budget kind of thing, $200 million budget. I mean, what's going to happen to that?
Yep. Must have been 15 years ago, maybe even longer. I saw Magic Johnson one day. He was on television being interviewed about some movie theaters that he had opened. And when he did it, he said, look, I remembered as a child when we would go to the theater, we would go there, we would get food, we would have some dinner, and he had this whole idea of kind of what the experience should be. And he focused on his theaters as an experience. It was a chance to take the family somewhere. So that was, okay, I kind of understand it. He's thinking about a value proposition and what all do I do to make that a great experience? Then as you said, where did that evolve? It got to the point where, hey, I got 5 kids, I want to go to the movies, it's $100? I want some popcorn, that's $12? I want a Coke, that's $4? You sort
Adam,
of like,
you haven't been in the movie theater lately because those numbers are actually half of what they really are.
You're right, I have not been to a theater in a while.
Coke is $8. A jug of popcorn is 18. The big ones, yeah.
So again, what you said, what's the value proposition? So these companies, AMC, Cineworld with Regal, they're not at all attuned to what the customer wants. They're completely lost track. They're not saying, could you create an environment where people are going to come and have an evening? I don't know what that would look like right now in today's world. But what I do know is that it isn't what they've been doing. Now, just this week, again, they announced here in Las Vegas that after all these months, they're going to reopen live shows. They're going to allow that to happen. But they're being very careful. You can't just have theater seating. So Spiegelworld, for example, is one of the producers in Vegas that's fairly popular. They've gone in where they had theater-style seating in some of their environments, and they could seat 300 people. They've removed the theater seating. They're putting tables in place. You can have 2 to 6 people, but you all have to know each other when you go in. You can't just randomly. It's like a group of 4 books, a group of 6 books. They all know each other.
Right.
And reducing the number of people that are going to be inside for this event down to about 125. And they're going to require that you wear a mask, right? So you're going to watch the show with a mask on, okay? Now, will people come and go? I think there's a big desire for some live entertainment. I think people will go and they'll live with the mask rules and they'll get in there and they'll try to, but what do we have? We have Spiegelworld saying, how do I try to have an entertaining experience, right? Which is not what we see the theater companies doing. Now, the backlash on that, though, is they say we don't have any content, okay? So they're sitting there tied to the value delivery system. We got these theaters with theater seating, and we wish we had content. On the other side, you have the content providers. And what do you have? You have AMC coming out saying, not AMC, MGM coming out saying, okay, we're delaying our movies, right? We're going to delay Flash and Shazam 2. And we don't know when we're going to release those. Then last week you had No Time to Die, the new 007 movie. They said, we're not going to release that one until 2022. So here you have the guys that were making the very expensive theater productions saying, you know what, we're afraid that you can't get enough people into the theaters, so we're not going to release the movie. Now you got the worst of all possible worlds, right? You got the guys, both sides are sitting there waiting for the other one to make something happen, and both of them are ignoring the reality, which is you need to do what they did over at Universal and say, look, we just got to move this stuff on demand. Right? We're going to have to find, because that's what's going to happen. And I was kind of impressed back in September. I took some digs on Disney in one of our podcasts a while back, a couple of months ago, and I really kind of poured in on what I thought was some fairly bad decision making. But in September, they ran an experiment. They said, okay, if you've got Disney Plus, you can get we're going to release Mulan, and it's going to cost you $30. Now, amidst all of this free content, they're going to charge you $30 to go on Disney Plus and watch this movie. 15% of all streaming that occurred the first weekend that movie came out were people streaming Mulan. I think that's
including myself, by the way.
Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, it was good. But here's the thing: it's definitely redefining. So my kids said we want to watch it, and I knew about this because of our podcast, of course. And I was sort of scratching my head and thinking, do I want to spend it? Man, why not? Right? We're not going to go to the movies and spend $120. We'll spend $30. It's okay. So we fell victim to that, but we enjoyed it and it was fine. 30 was a little bit steep, yeah. But in the end, it was worthwhile because of the experience we had.
And the reality was, it worked for Disney, right? They got enough people to cough up the $30. And so now what's happened is this week, you see Disney making they completely reorganized the company. They announced on Monday the 12th that they're going to they're going to have production in one group, right? So we're going to generate content. It's going to be sports, whether it's movies, whether it's television. All of the content that we're going to create is going to go into one business unit. We've got a whole second different business unit that's distribution. And it's going to have Disney Plus, and it's going to have access to the theaters and access to Netflix or other places we might want to take content, international distribution to Sky and some of those type of distributors. Now, that's really smart, because now what you're saying is, okay, I'm going to make the guys making the movies have to stand on their own. And they can't just go out and make a really expensive movie depending on distribution to happen. Because now the distribution guys can say, you know what, sorry, you're not going to get your money back, right? And the distribution guys are going to be able to have a voice to be able to say what's going to happen inside the organization. And it's going to allow Disney to take a much, much more focused view of their streaming business, which is clearly the future, right? It's clearly going to be around streaming. So I thought, wow, they didn't waste any time at all. That leadership that I was really concerned about 4 to 6 weeks ago stood up, made some really big decisions. And I think that's important for all of us to start to see, is that even when an organization's done something a long time the same way like Disney has, and they've made a lot of content, but they weren't in distribution, and they distributed through all these other entities. They came out with their own distribution now, Disney Plus, and then they not only are trying to take that to market, but they're experimenting with new models for how to take their content to market. Netflix has got content, it's always free. Disney's going to say, well, some's free, we're going to charge you for some, and they're out there experimenting. So they've got a bit of what I call the blank space, right? Some place where they can go experiment, try things, see what works. Most organizations, they don't do that. They don't experiment nearly enough. It's kind of good to see here this big company, Disney, creating some blank space where they can have a team of people really sit down and say, hey, maybe what we should do is we should do the pay-per-view like you did with Mulan. $30 might be too much. Maybe first night it's $30 for all the people that have to watch it the first day it's released. Maybe 3 days later it drops to $20. Maybe 2 weeks later it's $10. I'm just sitting here saying that I don't have the answer, but now we have someplace we can experiment.
Yeah, and I think that the industry in general, including the source and the both sides, where it's produced and where it's consumed, the theaters and the home, that whole industry, that whole value chain is just going to have to turn around and make some big decisions. Kind of an interesting note, there's a smaller theater here in Tucson called The Loft that features a lot of independent movies, and it's a really cool place. You get beer there, and it's they have a little bit higher end food. And of course, they've been closed down for the longest time, but you can rent the theater for a couple $100 and bring in your own people. I think it's 10 people. So a friend of mine brought my fiance's friend, invited her to an event, 10 people there. They got to pick their own movies, and it was something that was a new event. And that's just so they could survive, right? Obviously, there's not the long-term tail, but that whole industry needs to be shaken up somehow.
Yeah. Now, the other part of this that I tie into is I get off the plane and I go back to my house, right? Now, I've just spent 2 weeks in another part of the world, and I always tell people, get outside the box, then think. One of the wonderful things about travel like this is you get outside the box and you have to think. And when I'm out of the places of the world, You turn on the television, it's a different experience, right? You got a lot of stuff in different languages. Where I was at Russian television, it was a very, very different kind of a thing. And so it was good because I to the extent I watched entertainment, it was different experience. And then I come to my house, and I turn on my television, and what do I discover? Literally, CBS for the first 3 nights is all game shows. And, and then it's football games, and it's basketball games, and it's baseball games, and it's competitions like America's Got Talent, those kinds of things. That's just the name of one. There's a lot of those kinds of shows. There literally hasn't been, since I've returned, any sort of real show. Oh, there's been 2 real shows. One was called Transformation, the other was the FBI. Well, the only ones I could even find. Now, I didn't happen to watch those 2, but the point is just finding some kind of content that's not some sort of reality TV or sports is very difficult now on American television. So what are we seeing? Okay, what's happening in terms of the theaters, the same thing's happening now with television. You've got content, but the content now isn't coming from NBC, ABC, and CBS. The content's coming from your Netflix, which has got its own distribution. You've got Hulu, you've got distribution. You've got Disney with distribution. You've got Sky with distribution. And so we're seeing that the broadcasters are just getting driven to nothing, right? Unless you want to watch, I guess last night was the American Music Awards, unless you want to watch an award show, some kind of live entertainment like that, that's free. And that's the whole key. If you look across the spectrum of this entertainment, why is that what they're producing? Well, because, again, it's free, right? They're not paying an actor to be in a baseball game. They're not paying an actor to be on America's Got Talent. You're not paying people anymore. You don't have big sets. You don't have production costs. All that's going away because they're finding it increasingly impossible to actually be an entertainment broadcaster. So it's this, again, change in terms of the shift is going towards who's got the content. Now that the content creators are getting control of the distribution. And so what's going to happen are the companies that are making movies historically, like your MGMs and your Fox, Paramounts, those kinds of organizations are going to have to get their own distribution because this symbiotic relationship they had of content and then theaters is a dead part of history. It's an anchor.
Yeah, it is.
It's something that goes just back too long in time.
No, it definitely is. And I think the opportunity is right within the next, 6, 12 months here for something like this to happen. One of the things that we talk about as well is, in these places where there's a shift, there's going to be some real winners here if they make the right decisions. And, who knows what will happen to the theaters. Maybe they'll be, 80% of them will go away. Maybe all of them will go away. I don't know. There'll be a few boutique ones here and there, but the core, the content delivery methodology, is going to have to change significantly. And there's going to be definite winners in this whole process.
Yeah, I mean, the theaters are going to have to figure out a value proposition because the one they've had is dead. It's not going to be supporting. Here in Vegas, where we have theaters inside of casinos, you've sort of doubled up the problem because people struggle with the casino environment during COVID. It's a changing world now. That happens to the theaters. Again, overly focused on the value delivery system, insufficient focus on the value proposition. They're very likely not going anywhere. And so does that create opportunities? Sure. I don't know what's going to happen with that real estate. I look at the content creator side. That door's wide open now. Just this week, Apple launched a whole new bunch of iPhones, right? We got new cameras to get. So as you said, people can make movies with their cameras. That's just going to get easier and easier and easier. The editing tools are super easy now. Anybody that has a $1,000 or $1,500 to buy a Mac or a nice high-end PC can do their own editing.
Right.
You just really don't need all that much cost to get into it. But what's not there? One of the things I find missing is something that does editorial for me, right? Like I said, I saw 150 movies were available on the airplane, of which I recognized, I think, 3, right? And so I'm sitting there like, how am I going to decide what I want to watch? And the descriptions are so bad. I mean, they're just like so bad, right? And then I look at who the actors are, but I'm not sure that means anything to me because the actors I know are old. Right? They've been around a while because I'm old. So a lot of the good actors that I might see in a movie, and I like that movie, but I don't remember their names, right? Because I don't watch enough movies. I'm not into it enough. So I don't know what to watch. So I'm sitting there and I spend, it takes me 20 minutes to select a movie that I want to watch. And it happens to me in my house. I've subscribed to the Netflixes of the world, and I look at that and I say, what do I want to watch? And it's just so much content, and I don't know how to select anything. I find myself going online and trying to find reviews. Right. I go to ridiculous places like Market Watch to try to see, did you do a ranking of the popular Netflix shows? Because I struggle to find some. That's an opportunity. Can we tailor make? So I'm sitting here saying I'm a buyer, I'm a consumer. And so there's a missing part of the value proposition, right? So we have content creators, they're moving into distribution, they're creating a lot of content. We have a lot of independent content creators. They have thousands of different venues, YouTube, all kinds of ways they can get their content out there.
Right.
But what we don't have is we don't have somebody bridging that middle, helping us understand what we find. So that's just an example of one opportunity that's available. Packaging this stuff up into something that we, would know and recognize and be able to identify easily. These are creating new opportunities for our entrepreneurs to step in, as long as they're thinking about where it's going. And the biggest trend that this is all building on is, of course, asynchronicity. The four big trends are mobile, asynchronous behavior, gig economy, and artificial intelligence. Right. If we could start putting some artificial intelligence onto these movies so that whenever I'm cycling through the clicker or whatever tool I'm using to try to look across them, it would tell me something about them, right? Something that would help me get to the stuff I like. That artificial intelligence applied to that would be good. I'm obviously operating asynchronously. I obviously want to look at this in a mobile way, so making it easier for me to be cross-functional device. Now, it's pretty easy today, to be honest, but continuing to push down that road, it's going to be good. So these are the things that I think that our audience can think about in terms of, what could they do? How could they, in a gig economy way, help people get into production of entertainment, help with distribution of entertainment?
Yeah, I've had some family that is in the production side, just looking at some of the things that happened with COVID and these actors being sequestered in their home, and Saturday Night Live being produced from people's homes, and it sort of took everything upside down, and made me think about what these actors and these big budget guys they might be sweating bullets, thinking about, okay, here was my livelihood, and now it's being turned upside down. Yeah. So there's got to be some bridge, and we've mentioned this before in the past, how my 14-year-old, at least 2 years ago, he wanted to be a YouTuber, was his profession to be, right? Yeah. I was a kid, I wanted to be an astronaut. He wanted to be a YouTuber. It is what it is. And so what does that look like, taking advantage of the big power of Hollywood, because it still has a lot of power, still has a lot of money, a lot of know-how, but they're missing the boat and not following this trend. And you see a lot of this locked mentality, right? They're spending and extending, and they're not really looking at bridging to that next level. And I'm interested and curious to see what happens. Any final notes on this, Adam?
Well, I just think our audience needs to recognize that whatever business you're in, there's always this generation or product, right? Somebody's on the product side. And then there's this distribution question, right? And so you always have the product, you have the distribution, you have how you're going to price it, and how you're going to promote it. Today, in the world of cinema and broadcasting, we still have an awful lot of money spent on promotion, right? So if LA and the people in LA have clout, it's because they can spend so much money on promotion.
Right.
But that clout's dissipating all the time. What I think our audience needs to keep coming back to is, if you're in product or you're in distribution, the world is changing. You don't end up like the theaters where you've got this value delivery system depending on somebody else's product, and you've lost sight of the value proposition, right? So that you're sitting there waiting for someone else to figure out the answer, because you'll end up just being, obfuscated, and you go away like travel agents and insurance agents, everybody else, where the distribution is no longer necessary. Same time, if you're on the product side, realize that you're very likely going to have to do a lot more integrating into distribution no matter what business you're in. You used to be able to make windows and doors and sell them through a wholesaler. That's not true anymore, right? Now, most of the business is actually done direct. Anderson Windows, Chapella's, they sell direct. Those are the big guys. The specialty windows, same way. Sell direct, have a showroom.
Right.
It's kind of like, a lot of businesses, you've gone from selling in a warehouse environment to selling in a showroom, showing off your product specifically. So I think our customers our subscribers need to keep these issues in mind, realize that people are going to behave asynchronously, and the more you can apply artificial intelligence to help them make quick decisions, the better off they're going to be.
Those are very, very wise words, Adam. Thank you again. And looking forward to continuing the conversation on innovation trends and what's coming next in business. Have a great rest of your day, Adam, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you. You do the same.